Hello, everybody!
What's up in my headphones, Charles?
Turning it up. Hello, everybody. One and all, welcome back to yet another very exciting episode of the Friends Talking Fantasy Podcast. My name is Charles, and with me today, as always, is my lifelong friend and co-host, Dylan.
I'm ready to talk some fantasy with my friend Charles.
I'm ready to talk some fantasy with my friend as well, Dylan, but not just any fantasy today, because today we are continuing our episode discussions of HBO's biggest debut for a TV show of all time for HBO. I am, of course, referring to the Game of Thrones spin-off show House of the Dragon.
Yeah. This is pretty quickly rose to being a cultural phenomenon of its own, House of the Dragon. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's amazing to see how ready people were to embrace a new show in the world of Game of Thrones in Westeros here, and we're trying to embrace it ourselves by making back-to-back episodes on House of the Dragon.
Back-to-back. I mean, we can't keep doing this for 8 more weeks, just only House of the Dragon stuff, but you know what? We recorded that first episode, we put it out there, and you listened, so we're going to do it again for now, and we'll figure out how to work some more books back into the schedule. But for now, we are here with Season 1, Episode 2, The Rogue Prince. And Dylan, I think it's funny that you mentioned that this whole hesitation of were we ready to love Game of Thrones. I guess we are, because I thought that same thing when they finally, at the beginning of this episode, went full Game of Thrones theme song in the opening sequence.
Yeah, we were talking about this a little bit off air beforehand, and we were thinking they probably had that title sequence locked and loaded, and they were just trying to feel it out to see if people were really ready to go full nostalgia with Game of Thrones. And when they saw those viewership numbers, A, they renewed House of the Dragon for a second season after only 1 episode. Right. And B, they were like, we're going full out, minutes long title sequence here.
Yeah, I knew
and
last
Charles,
week
I loved
that
it.
They were so hesitant, and I was even tweeting about this. I'm like, it's like they weren't sure. They're like, this is what we want to do. We just want to blast the Game of Thrones theme song to you guys, but we're not sure. So we'll work it into motifs at the end of the episode to try and upset as few people as possible. And then, 10 million viewers later, they're like, Game of Thrones, guys, and it's like blasting it. Like, this starts with that. And I'm like, okay, we're all ready. We're all back now. I could tell. You could have easily, I would not be surprised if the, opening was abysmal and everyone hated the episode, if they just axed the title crawl completely. Like, we can't play that music. Don't play that music. Yeah. They definitely had a plan B.
Yeah, I totally agree, but it seems like Plan A is working out well, and I think that episode 2 worked out well also. I'm excited for us to get into that, but before we do, I want to give my spoiler warning. We will be getting into House of the Dragon, Season 1, Episode 2, in a no-holds-barred conversation, which means we're not going to hold back on spoilers. So if you haven't yet watched that episode, then now's a good time to turn this down in your headphones, because we're gonna talk about everything, all the big points here. I'm excited, Charles. We haven't talked about this yet. I think you're fresh off watching the episode, right?
Yes, I was traveling on Sunday night, and it's Monday night at the time we're recording this. So I had to, traveled, went to work, watched the episode, recorded. There's no break in between. So super happy to get into it. I'm fresh off the episode. The Rogue Prince, interesting title for the episode, because, the whole plot of this episode is around Daemon's action to go rogue and steal the dragon egg. But what's interesting beyond that is how the episode chooses to compare that to, we have Rhaenyra as well, who I think is going a bit rogue as well.
That she is. She starts the episode where she's still the cupbearer. After being named the heir to the Iron Throne, she's still at those small council meetings pouring people's wine. And yeah, you can tell that despite this change in her title and all that, she's still not really being taken seriously at court. Apparently she's 15. The actress does not look 15 at all, so that's taken a little bit of suspension of disbelief for me. But yeah, she starts to really, as you said, Charles, go rogue and take some actions into her own hands.
Right.
I'm sure we'll get into those. The first of which is when she is Otto Hightower says that she should pick the next Kingsguard guy. And
kicked her out of the closed council, basically.
Yeah.
A small council. Right. I'm doing a little first law Game of Thrones crossover here. It's the small council in Westeros, not the closed council.
That's true.
Yeah. It's an interesting, it is that she has that outburst of, trying to be a part of the conversation, and everyone's like, 1, you're 15, 2, you're a woman, 3, you leave, and they kick her out. But what's interesting about that is because, again, paralleling her with Damon, what's his name? I always forget. Damon. These Targaryen names are so hard for me to remember. Damon.
There's not even a Y in that one, Charles. You got to get, if there's no Y, you've got no excuse. Once the Y's get involved, I understand.
I'm not seeing it spelled out. I don't know how many Y's are in it when they just say the name.
Damon's like a real name, Charles. There are real people named Damon out there.
Yeah, but I don't know what his name was, Damon. It sounded too normal. It's like there's, Damian, like a dragon kind of situation.
Daenerys.
Yeah, Daenerys.
Daenerys Targaryen.
Exactly, that could have been the next dragon. But it's in a way trying to be that she's trying to prove herself and prove herself worthy, which Damon is also kind of trying to do. He's trying to be like, I'm my own person. I deserve power and respect too, of the very different ages and power rankings and everything. But it's just interesting to see the episode kick off with Rhaenyra going through that, and how she's... I kind of like that she's the cupbearer. It's a way to put her in the room, and she can learn and she can see things without actually having a seat, which even if she was male and all this, she's still only 15, so it doesn't matter. It's just the way to keep her in the room and get her to learn how things are run in court.
Yeah, that part makes sense. And I think part of it too is it just looks weird with her clearly being in her 20s, the actress clearly being in her 20s. If it was an actual 15-year-old walking around with the pouring glass of wine, it's okay, that makes more sense from the perspective of it's this kid kind of learning the ways. But yeah, we'll give her that she is actually 15, and it does make sense. But it is still kind of demeaning for the person who is supposed to be the queen,
heir apparent.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, she holds her own, and the episode ends with, well, not really. Her last moments is where she kind of commands that respect, because she's kind of butting heads with Otto Hightower this whole episode, starting with him kicking her out, and then in the last scene where she's confronting Damon, and Otto Hightower's like, "What are you doing here? We got this. We're gonna fight him. It'll be fine." And she's comes in total boss and resolves the conflict bloodshed free, which is a pretty impressive feat.
Yeah. Yeah, you're talking about when she flies in on her dragon, and that's immediately after Damon gives a reminder to Otto Hightower and his troops that he has a giant red dragon, which
Yes.
it did feel like one of those moments, Charles, when I was watching it, where it was Otto shows up with these troops, and they're all on a bridge, and then the dragon comes out, and I was just like, Otto kind of forgot that. Right, that
The old Benioff and Weiss.
Otto, yeah, exactly. It's like
I don't remember
Otto
that
kind
in
of-
after the episode of this. It's like,
right. Otto kind of forgot that Damon had a giant red dragon that could have eviscerated his entire forces.
I mean, Otto's
Yeah.
just so hungry to embarrass and basically write off Damon that he was willing to charge in and thinking he could daddy up on Damon, where Damon's like, I've the only one here that's commanding this impressive army, and I've got this huge ass dragon. Like, I'm still a Targaryen. I know what I'm like. You don't stand a chance against me. It took another Targaryen to come in to have that kind of power standoff. That's that. What do they call it when? In like the Cold War, when you have two mutually assured destruction kind of thing of like, we're not going to fight each other. We're not going to have two dragons fight each other right now. It's crazy.
But the thing is, her dragon is so much smaller. It's apparently
Yes.
a young dragon, Syrax or Cyrax, and one of those Syrax, and it's a very young dragon, and you could tell when it was flying in. That was actually some awesome CGI moment where you get to see her dragon size-wise compared to his dragon. And
I agree.
She is outmatched. She pretty much wields the power of Damon's affection for her
Yes.
as her biggest weapon. She walks right up to him and she's like, hey, you want to be there to the throne? You gotta kill me. And she's standing right in front of him. He could do it, but she knows that her uncle loves her and is unwilling to do that. We saw that in the first episode. There were these couple moments. We talked about that in our last week's podcast episode about Damon a couple times shows genuine affection for Rhaenyra, and it's something that she knows and takes advantage of here. You gotta give her props for that. And I don't think there was any other way that they were going to get that egg without bloodshed.
I agree. She's also like, okay, it's one thing to fight off an army. It's another thing to fight another Targaryen in like basically open rebellion of the crown. I mean, yes, you're the hand of the king and all that, and you're gonna fight him and maybe kill him, but Targaryen on Targaryen violence, dragon on dragon violence, that's a whole nother level. And it makes Daemon, to me, the most interesting character, because, and kudos to Matt Smith's performance as Daemon, because I genuinely don't know where his values are aligned a lot of the time, and I don't think Daemon knows where his values are aligned most of the time, and I think that's what makes him so interesting. Like, he wants to be like the heir apparent. He wants to be king someday, but he also doesn't want to kill his uncle and doesn't want to kill his niece. And it's this weird relationship that he's in where there's just no right answers, and he's also kind of sniveling, and he kind of punks out at the end and just like throws the egg over his shoulder. It's like, come on, a little more respect than that.
I thought that was such a good character moment, how he just like turns around and just like chucks the egg, no respect behind his back. I was like, that just goes to show who he is so much.
Yeah.
And like you said, Matt Smith is killing it in that role. He's capturing that weird balance between, like you said, that sniveling side of him, that arrogant side of him, but also the charisma that he shows. I mean, you remember in the previous episode where he's giving that speech to the Yellow Jackets, the gold cloaks. Yellow Jackets are these. To the gold cloaks, and he's like getting them all like rah rah, and then there's that weird scene of them just murdering people like recklessly.
Are these criminals?
But anyway,
Are they not criminals? It's just like what is happening?
Right. But the way he gives that speech, the Gold Cloaks, you see his charisma, and then you get to see this kind of like this little brother sniveling side of him around this moment, and sometimes when he's around Viserys and Otto. So he's doing such a good job, Matt Smith.
Yeah.
And
it's because he doesn't quite fit one particular mold of a trope. For example, like there's a lot of tropes he's like adjacent to, but he never fully commits to any of them. He's like, you know, the super confident, handsome, evil guy, or he's the like sneaky backstabbing guy, or he's the loving family guy, or he's the betrayer uncle guy. He's kind of all of those things and none of those things. So it's an interesting mix. He's definitely the character that I'm like enjoying kind of unpacking and wanting to see more of, because I genuinely don't know what he's going to be up to from one moment to the next. And he seems like he's just marrying this other person purely for love. You get like you don't understand that too much at this point. There's not enough information, but yeah, his loyalties are all over the place, and it's fascinating.
Yeah, the way you're talking about the complexity of his character makes me think he's almost got these pieces that you could grab from all these past Game of Thrones characters, and then you mix them all up, like this amalgamation that's different from any of them, right? He's like 3 parts Jaime, 2 parts like Euron Greyjoy, 1 part Littlefinger, right? All these different things are put together. You can see all of those people in him, but with that mix, he's none of them in total, and he's his own unique character.
Right.
And
it's definitely, you don't know, it's like, is he, oh, go ahead, I don't want to interrupt you.
Well, yeah.
You said you were liking about something I was saying.
Yes, I was liking something about what you were saying, which
please go on.
Was this idea of, like, you don't really know where he stands. He's not exactly sure where he stands or what he's doing. Mm-hmm. And it's actually such a difficult balance to strike with character writing, to have a character where you don't really quite get his deal, but it feels like that is actually part of what makes the character interesting and true, rather than like, oh, this character just goes around doing whatever the plot needs him to do. Like, it never feels like contrived when he's making these decisions. It just feels like, oh, we're getting to know this guy better, and he's super complex with all of these divided parts of himself that are tugging him in different directions. So
I agree completely. Props. You see a character like Princess Rhaenyra, who's like, you know, girl boss, trying to become powerful, do the right thing, and total protagonist character, and you got that. You have King Viserys. He's a kind, decent guy. He's weighing the responsibility of the crown. The crown weighs heavy on his head. You know that story. You don't necessarily know what Daemon wants. Like, yeah, he wants power, but you don't buy that he actually really wants to grab the throne. A lot of this episode, his actions in this, and even like in the afterwards, the showrunners were kind of getting into this about how the driving force of that action to take the egg was to just be provocative and get the attention of his family. Part of me wonders, like, is this someone who just wants to be brought back into the inner circle of his family, or is this someone who's doing an elaborate plot to, like, I'm gonna lure the king out and kill him with my dragon? Like, I don't think it's that at all, but I think what makes Daemon so good is that he doesn't know, right? It's too complicated. He's too, like, immature to have figured it out yet, and we don't know as viewers what he's planning to do. The show's making us feel like he's like this Scar in The Lion King kind of character, this uncle who's like, I'll kill Mufasa and then I'm coming after you, Simba. Yeah, exactly.
Right,
but he's not quite
uncle,
Scar,
right?
Yeah, exactly. But he's not. It's not quite that Shakespearean role. There's a bit more family drama baked in. It's not so Shakespearean as Lion King.
Yeah, although I will say that Mufasa was a stronger leader than Viserys seems to be.
Oh, for sure, but at least Viserys seems like a nice guy.
He does, yeah, and I do respect props to him for taking a stand about like I'm not gonna marry this 12-year-old.
Yeah, and everyone's like,
There's
don't
there's
worry,
a
she'll
line
get
here.
older. It's like, that doesn't count. That doesn't matter.
No, there's never an excuse to go around marrying 12-year-olds, and Viserys puts a line in the sand. So props to him for that.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think he handled the decision of who he was going to marry extremely poorly. Like, such bad leadership the way he goes about this, right? He pretty much makes it seem like he's about to go through with this other marriage. He's got it's the master of ships, right? Who's the sea snake, Lord Corlys Valerian.
Yeah, Valerian,
Yeah, I'm just trying to make sure if he's actually the master of ships or what his role is.
He
on that. But he's got to be, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so anyway, so Corlys is trying to maneuver that his 12-year-old daughter is going to marry Viserys, and they're kind of going through this courting process, which looks a lot more like babysitting or just going for a walk. And then he makes it seem like he's going to go that way. He asks a million people what he should do because it seems to be Viserys's way of ruling, is just being indecisive and asking everyone and then just like making this weird decision at the end.
Right.
And the way he goes about it, obviously he's been having these visits in his chambers with Lady Alicent Hightower, and you can tell he's kind of falling for her or whatever. But he just has this like big reveal moment in front of the whole small council, where he's like, it's like everyone who doesn't want this to happen is there hearing it all at once. Like, he doesn't do any like approaching people behind the scenes and being like, hey,
except
by
maybe
the way,
Otto
I'm
Hightower,
going to go
I bet
about
pretty
this.
stoked.
Oh, Otto was pumped. Yeah. But other than Otto, everyone else was like, oh no. And he just, he embarrassed Corlys.
Yes.
He pissed off his daughter. Like, that was, he just had this big heart-to-heart with Rhaenyra.
And there was that
like,
weird conversation, too, where Viserys is with Alicent, and he's like, don't tell her about any of this. Like, don't tell my daughter this. She can't handle it. She won't understand. She's too sensitive.
Right.
You're like, ooh.
Yeah. But she can... Yeah, it's absolutely terrible to give her any warning before you decide you're going to marry her best friend. And that is... Yeah, he's got no social depth, right? No. He's this nice, well-meaning person, but the way he goes about things, he's just politically doesn't have that ability to maneuver in the way that we've seen all these incredible political maneuverers, in at least in the past in Game of Thrones. You think of Tyrion, Littlefinger, etc.
Right.
He just doesn't have any of that, and it's just constant blunder after blunder, it feels like.
Right.
With him.
He basically made an enemy, kind of Daemon in episode 1. Now he's made a definite enemy of Corlys Valerian, the sea snake. He definitely made an enemy of him. And it's like, for what? He made an enemy of Daemon because he made a comment about his late son that he didn't like. And then it's like, you just have to marry Alicent. The Tyrions and Littlefingers of the world are like, you don't, like, what do you gain from marrying her? You gain literally nothing except maybe being able to, like, procreate. But you could do that with anybody. It's like, you like her, but you're like, the hand of the king is already like there. I don't feel like there's enough there to be like,
that's his closest ally probably is Otto Hightower, I would imagine.
Yeah,
so,
but it's like,
what I'm agreeing with you. I'm saying that you don't gain anything by being like, oh, let me marry the person where I already have this family on my side.
I like Otto, and then this woman's been really nice to me, and I love her. So like, aren't those two things great? And it's like, but you're not thinking of like, the whole point a king gets married is to make an allegiance. Why make an allegiance when you already have about as strong of a bond as you can with this family?
Yeah.
And you don't even have to marry anybody, So that part to me, which I don't think Viserys really cares about, obviously. He asked everyone's opinion, and they all told him the other thing, and he chose to ignore it, which I guess, like, kudos. I don't think he's wrong necessarily, but yeah, like you said, Dylan, there's more sensitive depth ways to do that than to make like he immediately Corlys immediately the next scene is like, Daemon, you and I have been like this the whole time. What do you say? It's like, dude, you were just trying to get married to Viserys like 2 seconds ago, and now you're all buddy with Daemon. Like, you and me, we're a lot alike. Make our partnership just makes a whole lot of sense. So it was
right.
Like,
I did love Daemon in that scene, because Daemon saw right through Corlys's bullcrap there. He's like, he's like, it keeps telling him, he's like, kind of keeping him in check. He's like, I do want you on my side, but I'm not going to pretend we've been buddy this whole time. I don't play those stupid games. So.
And he likes that someone's paying attention to him and treating him like a player in this game. You know, I think there's a part of him that enjoyed that, but he's not dumb enough to let that affect his behavior, decision. He didn't let him get away with any of it. He was like, "You're talking about my brother here." It's like, you don't get to say that. You know, there's some good moments there.
I did like that moment.
Yeah, where it's like, we're not equals. I'm of this family and you're not. Like, I'm royalty and you're not. Like.
Right.
Let's make that clear. And it's not like Daemon was like, I'm in, and they shook hands at the end of the scene. You know, it's like, you don't know where that's going to quite go just yet. But the fact that Corlys is willing to do that is bold. And his wife, Rhaenys Targaryen, she's had some interesting moments in this episode as well.
Yeah, I think it's definitely important for us to talk about the scene where Rhaenys and Rhaenyra talk to each other. I think that's one of the most important ones that happened in this episode. It's an interesting one. I think I wasn't expecting Rhaenys to be so, I guess, encouraging of the patriarchy, for lack of a better way to phrase it.
Right.
Like, there's a part of her that definitely is still pissed that she didn't get named the queen, but she also is kind of like this is just how it works, and they're not gonna ever take you seriously, Rhaenyra, so they're just gonna move on from you. You're a placeholder. And she has that, like, men would rather see the like kingdom. Maybe you have the quote, Charles.
Yeah.
You look like
I was typing as fast as I could while they were saying it, so it's not a direct quote, but the hard truth: men would sooner put a torch to their realm than see a woman on the Iron Throne, something like that.
I feel like you got it. I feel like
that was pretty much it.
Yeah.
So
can I say before we get into that, like, actual stuff with that, that I couldn't help myself. You know, there's that meme that's like, men would rather X than go to therapy.
Yeah.
You know that meme?
Right. Exactly.
So when she started, it's like, I couldn't help but fill it in my head. So it was like, men would rather burn
put a torch to the realm.
Put a torch to the realm than go to therapy. So
actually,
it's tough because it's like, yeah, it is kind of true, but it's yeah,
it's basically Daemon's whole character arc right now.
Right. So
a little therapy would probably put that guy right.
They need family therapy. That's what they need.
Yeah. Because there's so many scenes of them, like, trying to communicate, whether they're at dinner or in a courtroom or speaking to each other in a garden walk, and they're kind of having these moments every once in a while. I'm like, oh, I'm glad you said that you were struggling, Dad, because I've been struggling too. But nothing ever really, there's no breakthrough moment. Like, there's a couple of these nice communication moments, but there's no breakthroughs. And I think the issue that you're touching on is, like, you know, we have Viserys, who's not fully in tune with any people, really. Like he doesn't fully understand his relationship with people at all. And then you have Rhaenyra and Daemon trying to get his attention and connect with him, and connect with each other too. And it's just all this communication breakdown. Family therapy would be pretty good for them.
For sure. And I'll also say that Rhaenys, right at the end, she's like, "And your father is no fool." And I was like, yeah. I don't know. I kind of think he is a fool. Like,
he's a little foolish, but he surprises me. You know, I think he's kind of soft, but I don't think he is necessarily a slouch. But that I gotta be honest, that scene with Rhaenys Targaryen, like, that was one of the more deliberate like, hammer home the theme as clearly as possible by straight up saying it, like, you live in a patriarchal society, no one cares. But I don't know. To me, it comes a little short, and I do like that there's this much like, well, they didn't not vote for women ever. They just didn't vote for you. Like, you kind of suck. You're a bit of an ice queen, kind of. So, and then, but then you have Rhaenyra just totally taking control. But it's like, this is a family where Viserys, in a apparently controversial, no one's complained about it or said anything, but I think it's going to be this slow burn thing. Obviously it's leading to something, but we have, in 2 episodes, we haven't seen it. We've been told over and over again this is patriarchal, no one will agree to a woman on the Iron Throne. And then you have Rhaenyra being like, they all bend the knee to me, like, my dad made me the heir apparent, I am the heir apparent, like, I can ride dragons, like, I think I've got this. So like, I don't know. For me, it's like I'm trying to see more of the struggle, but there hasn't really been that clash yet, really, except for maybe Otto Hightower, like, being dismissive of her, and her dad being dismissive of her subconsciously. But there hasn't been a real issue. She's been able to just get on the dragon and ride, and she's, got good ideas, and she's made Kristen Cole Kingsguard and all that stuff, so she's doing great. It's just that for some reason she can't get what's her face on board, Rhaenys on board. Like, you think Rhaenys would want to support her in some way, but I think they want to be in charge.
She's jealous.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think she's just jealous as she sees this, like, younger woman who's gonna get all the things that Rhaenys wanted.
Yeah, she was so close to getting so close.
Yeah, right. And it's telling about her character that she's gotten more of the way of, I'm envious of you, so I'm gonna put you down, and this will never work. Rather than like, hey, this is what I want, and I see some of myself in you, and I'm gonna help mentor you, because that easily could have been the way.
Yeah, because it's like, you're my niece, like, we're family. Yeah. Like, there's a lot we could benefit from working together, a lot we could do for women, that kind of thing.
Yeah, but she's kind of more out for herself, it seems like.
Yeah, the crown is just too tempting. The Iron Throne is too tempting.
That it is. That's definitely been a big theme of Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon. It seems like people definitely tend to want to get on that Iron Throne.
Yes. Yes. One of the things that's been kind of subtly sprinkled throughout these 2 episodes but never really addressed is King Viserys' illness. At first, in episode 1, it looked like it could have been grayscale. I was like, is that a grayscale mark on his back?
I didn't even think about that.
But then, in this one, it's on his finger, and his finger's like decaying. I'm not sure what's going on there, but he's slowly decaying, and there's only a few people around him that know. The Grand Maester and then Otto Hightower are basically the only 2 people. And they're like bathing his hand in maggots to try and get the dead flesh off. I'm like, is this grayscale or is this something else? How is this going to pay off?
these Maesters do not know what they're doing.
No.
I'm going to put it out there.
No.
This is not really a good team that he's assembled for his Maesters. They look like the Jets, the New York Jets medical team. Like Mekhi Becton out there for my football fans. Just not coming back this season because what can you do when you've got a staff like that? That's the Maesters over here. I feel like, say what you want about Maester Pycelle, but I think he ran a better ship over.
He had 200 years of medical advancements. And that's one of the funny things to me. It's like you couldn't, if you go 200 years in the future of any society, a lot would change, but almost nothing changed in Westeros. Like hardly anything. And if anything, it got worse.
That's a big thing. Yeah, Westeros is just in this medieval stasis, and it's probably been like that for 1,000 years, not even just 200. It's just kind of where it stays, and I think that's kind of a trope with some of these fantasy stories is that no matter how far you go back or forward, it's just kind of this medieval world. I mean, look at Lord of the Rings. Things just kind of chill at
for
that.
Whole
I know
age.
it's kind of a more magical world,
right.
But they just don't really make technological advances. And maybe I'm going to get some crap from big Tolkien fans for that one. Actually, the dwarves made great advances. I was like, okay, but let's be real here.
And Hobbiton's not supposed to change, but at least in this case in Westeros, they didn't do any big renovations. At least it looks like. But I think the one thing that does feel 200 years behind is medicine. No one was bathing in maggots in Game of Thrones, that's for sure. At least you had Samwell trying to use the scientific method to cure people of uncurable, air quote, uncurable diseases and things like that. So it's just it's just funny to see. And I don't know where this is going, what the cause is, what we need to be looking out for. It just keeps happening with the king, these weird sicknesses.
I mean, that clock is ticking, right? This guy has to be moving toward, if he doesn't die of something else, this guy, it's got to eventually take him down. And I think it's kind of this ticking time bomb where he has to, he's got to get a male heir out
get
there.
His succession in order,
do. I mean, yeah. He's been saying to Rhaenyra that he just wants to secure the family line, and that's why he's trying to have more children. I mean,
but if you're Rhaenyra, that hurts.
BS to me. Yeah, I mean, it reads as BS to me because I think that you have to agree with Rhaenys on one thing, which is if he does have a male child at some point, it's hard to imagine that child does not end up skipping ahead of Rhaenyra in the order of succession, no matter what Rhaenyra has been named at this point.
Yeah, and I think Rhaenyra kind of is realized that it's like, why else would you want to have more kids if not to secure your succession? So you have me, the succession is technically secured, so I don't know why you're trying to continue that, you know?
Yeah, well, I think you still want to have more kids as a king, and I do think there is a security that comes. I mean, think
two
of
people die
in Game of Thrones, right? Yeah, I think they just try to have as many as possible, usually in that position. And that being said, it still reads as BS that he's like, oh yeah, we're just kind of getting some safety net going here. It's like, dude, you want a son. You've wanted a son your whole life, and you're definitely trying to have one, and probably you gotta know that kid's gonna jump over, leapfrog Rhaenyra, just because those are the norms of this society, and that's what people expect.
Exactly, but I don't know, the way this timeline is playing out, let's say he has a kid, and then immediately dies, and then there's a male baby and her, it's like, what happens? Does she reign until this kid is 18? There's a lot of implications still brewing that we're early enough in the season that we don't know where it's going to go. But the idea of making the king sick, but not too sick, just mysteriously a little sick, so that we can, ramp it up or scale it back as we need to. Keeping us on our toes, kind of, is interesting. Something we can't forget, because I've forgotten it while I'm watching. You forget because it's such a quick little scene, but it's been persistent over both episodes.
Yeah, it's definitely going to play a role in some way. And we have to keep in mind, too, that if he does have a male child, or any child at this point, assuming all this marriage stuff goes through, that child is going to be Otto Hightower's grandchild. So have to think that
not grandchild is grandson.
Oh,
yeah, it is.
His daughter's child.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Correct.
Anyway, that's going to be his grandchild, and he's going to do everything in his power, and he's super ambitious to make sure that kid ends up on the Iron Throne, his bloodline, and not Rhaenyra. So keep all that in mind. I think that's the thing. The child, we know there's going to be a time skip at some point. I mean, this isn't a secret because we know that there's 2 people cast in a bunch of these roles, right? There's 2 Rhaenyras and there's 2 Lady Alicents.
Right, and cast. Between episode 1 and 2, we already skipped 6 months, so who knows where we're going to go from here.
Right. So we could go a lot of ways there, but there's a lot of time for that kid to get born, and for Otto Hightower, it's still going to be a child at the oldest still. This time skip, we can tell, is going to only be probably tops like a decade based on the different actors being cast.
Right.
And that means that it'd probably be one of those Otto would try to be warden, I think is what they called it. Like, when someone's sitting in for their ruling until the king comes of age. So you have to think he'd be gunning for something like that.
Like,
he'd be
I've been ruling the kingdom for a long time. You're just a 15-year-old girl or 25-year-old girl at this point, like woman, but he wouldn't care. And that's true. That's an interesting move.
Well, I think he'd just try to get the kid named heir to the throne, and then he would say, "Hey, I'm the hand of the king. This is my grandchild, who is going to be the king until they come of age."
But then you also have the interesting relationship, this will they, won't they, between Rhaenyra and Alicent, right? Because
that is interesting.
The show keeps playing like maybe their relationship is more than just a friendship. It at least wants you to think that, lingering handshakes and stuff like that, but nothing definitive. But I kept thinking, like, do they want me to think that they're in love? Every time I see them together, there is that bit of chemistry in their performances.
I agree. Yeah, I was trying to think. I really would believe it goes any way between they both have some feelings for each other, or either one of them has feelings for the other one that are not reciprocated.
Right.
I would believe any of that.
Right.
It just depends. They've set it up where it is like you're saying, Charles. It's kind of just this subtext. It just feels like there's a little something more in that first episode, just the way that she was like lying down, like Rhaenyra was like lying down with her head on Alicent's lap or something like that.
They're talking about, there's nowhere I'd rather be in all the kingdoms and this and that. And,
right. And it's like, Charles, we're good friends, but we don't really we don't really say things like that. We don't really do anything at the level that they're doing. So I think that it feels like a little bit more between Rhaenyra and Alicent, but maybe they're just super close. You just
maybe it's certainly possible. Nothing definitive, but Alicent, she's going through not really self-harm, but she's like picking at her hands and her fingernails, and you can tell that she is very kind towards King Viserys and very thoughtful, getting him nice gifts and all of this stuff, and genuinely wanting to console him, but you don't get any intimacy between them at all, and you wonder if this this is a kind of maybe front that she puts on. Like, I wouldn't be too surprised if that was kind of the case for her. But again, it's all speculation at this point.
Well, yeah, the Viserys stuff, she's not feeling it on a romantic level like that. She has that moment with her dad, and you can tell he's coercing her. He's like, "Oh, are you gonna go up to his place tonight?" And she's like, "Oh, if something along the lines of, if you insist."
Yeah, and she's also like 14 and he's old, so it's weird anyway.
It's hard to remember that too, because again, the actress looks like she's probably like 22. And
right. 22 playing someone younger, but it still doesn't register as 14, like that young. So
right, and there's just something different, like when you had that actress who was playing the 12-year-old walking around with Viserys. It's like, oh my god, this is not right. Like,
the high prepubescent voice and all of that, and so much smaller. Yeah, and that's apparently 2 years difference. Like, come on.
Oh yeah, that's actually. Is she 14? She's not 15.
I've read conflicting things. I mean, it's a 6-month time skip, so you could say 15 to be generous, like 3 years now. Difference.
Yeah, and it just doesn't look like that. It looks like 2 adults. It looks like Dane Cook and his new fiance, which has been in that. Have you been following that at all?
I have.
You have,
and if you do the math, it's troubling.
It's very troubling. So, I mean, Dane Cook's like 50 and his fiance is like 23 or something like that.
But they've been dating for X amount of years. When you go back to she was under 18 when they were.
I think she was 18. But still.
But they were introduced before that, and then they started dating at 18. Wow. But anyway, who's us to speculate
it's gross,
on that?
It's creepy. Anti-Dane Cook on this podcast. Google it. But that's more like now with where Dane Cook and his
so Dane Cook is King Viserys,
like
and the fiance is Alicent, kind of thing.
Yes, that's how it feels. Where you see a picture of them together and you're like this really should not be. But it's not like you're looking at a child it looks like 2 consenting adults. And that's probably because the age difference between the 2 actors, like it's Patty Considine. I don't know if I'm saying that right.
On the spot for the actor.
Yeah, I've got Patty Considine. And then the actress who's playing young Alicent Hightower is Emily Carey. Mm-hmm. So I'm imagining, I could probably find out pretty quick. Oh, Emily Carey is apparently 19. She looked like early 20s to me. And then Patty is 48. So actually that age difference is probably very similar to the Dane Cook to his fiance.
Yeah, we were pretty much spot on with that gap. It's still an obvious age gap. It's like, why would these two ever be together? Yeah,
right. But also, it's like it does look like 2 consenting adults who are kind of like, you know what?
And you get weird royalty in the mix in medieval ages. You're like, okay, like this is whatever. But
there's a big difference between that. And then, literally, that is a 12-year-old child walking around with
Laena and Viserys.
Yeah,
they do mention Aegon the Conqueror in that little garden walk between Viserys and Laena. Just shout out, and I actually had to, because they were talking about, you rode the black dragon. I had to Google it. Balerion the Black Dread. This is just a quick little aside. Apparently Viserys successfully mounted Balerion at 16. So that's kind of around the age where Rhaenyra is right now. Did I say that again? I said that name right? Rhaenyra? Yeah, that Rhaenyra is now. Yeah. So you can kind of see that there's some potential connection there of riding a dragon. But what's interesting is Viserys I rode this legendary dragon of Aegon the Conqueror's, and it was whatever, I was like, this is not for me. I'm going to just walk away from that. It's interesting, of all of the Targaryens, he has no dragons. It's like, skip the generation, but Yeah, it's cool. It was just an interesting little aside that I had to Google because I'm like, they just threw that out there. I'm supposed to know that, what they're talking about? I didn't read Fire and Blood, so...
well, Balerion the Dread is like a big figure in A Song of Ice and Fire history. Like,
yeah, and Aegon
I'm sure
the
it's
Conqueror,
mentioned.
yeah.
Yeah, because it's Aegon the Conqueror. Mm-hmm. Then I just didn't know. I guess the dragons live really long because it's been a long time still since Aegon the Conqueror. I think over a century.
Mm-hmm.
I used to be so into this. I would have like known all of that
everything. It's been a few years since we've been Westeros aficionados, but we're coming back, people. The Game of Thrones theme song is pumping in our veins and in the show, unaltered, unedited. Just they're like use the same theme song again. Keep it cranking. So.
Was that supposed to be a segue? Then I'm like, and you know what else we should get pumping?
I mean, it could be. Do we need to say anything else about this show? We were talking about the weird age gap and the potential for these different relationships, which before that we were talking about this like almost potential love triangle between Rhaenyra, Alicent, and the king. Yeah.
You never want to be in a love triangle with your own father in the mix. You know,
I mean, you don't want to be in a love triangle with your daughter and her friend, her age-appropriate friend. Like, you just don't want to find yourself in that position. Not ideal.
Yeah. I will say, and I'm really thinking about if Alicent is 14, this like, I'm a noble man. I won't marry a 12-year-old. I'll marry a 14-year-old. It really is not as, I guess.
Yeah, well, he never really speaks out about the age. It's like she's kind of young, but it never was like, I'm not doing this because she's too young.
He says she's 12 at one point. Like, someone's trying to convince him.
But I think the real reason is because 12. He genuinely loves or at least likes Alicent. You know, because he was like, oh, I loved your mom. Like, I think he's a romantic at heart, and maybe he recognizes that it's not the best match, but he's following his heart, kind of a thing.
Well, we know how well that went for Robb Stark, so following your heart, definitely a great idea in Westeros.
Yeah, in politics and
among
royalty.
Kings.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, it was so funny when it's like, oh, and Daemon invites you to his wedding. I'm like, don't go. Don't go to any weddings. You can't have any weddings on these shows. It's not allowed. So, I mean, someone's got to get married soon, right? It's like, what are these? Holy smokes. Things are coming.
I mean, I assume that Alicent Viserys wedding will be the first one up. I don't know if they're going to show the Daemon wedding.
Right, if that even happens. Like, that is a new character that's kind of interesting. The, like, fiancé, the second wife of Daemon. But we don't know anything about her, really, other than they didn't communicate beforehand about the narrative of having a baby, which is not the greatest foundation for a relationship, but we'll see how that goes. It kind of speaks more to Daemon's emotional immaturity than anything else, which we love for him. You know, get therapy, Daemon.
Hashtag get therapy, Daemon.
The only other thing we didn't
or it should be like, get Daemon therapy. Like, someone get this man therapy.
Yeah, just the whole Targaryen sit-down intervention.
Yeah.
But
or hashtag Targaryen family therapy.
Yes. That would be something. Exactly. The only other thing we didn't speak about in this episode is the crab feeder and all that. Like, we kind of mentioned a little bit about the sea snake being upset about the stone steps and his fleets getting crushed and all of that. But there is this question mark around the crab feeder. They show he's kind of creepy looking guy.
I like that mask.
Yeah, he's cool looking. I want to see more crab feeder. It kind of gives me like early Greyjoy vibes, and we'll see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I feel like this episode was mostly a setup episode.
Yeah.
And I was again captivated, like I said, about the first episode. I was enjoying the whole thing and entertained. But then by the end of it, I was like, okay, not that much happened, right? A dragon egg was stolen and returned.
Right.
Right. We've got an engagement, but most of the episode was about him being like, oh, should I get engaged to this person? No.
Right.
I guess I'll get engaged to
Corlys
that
and
person.
Daemon maybe forming an alliance.
Yeah. So it's really setting the stage for these events that are clearly going to happen soon. And I feel like it's time for a battle, Charles. I'm ready for a battle, I think, in the next episode. And I feel pretty good that we're going to get one.
Yeah, they gave us a little bit of intense violence, teasing the crab feeder, but I'm ready for some proper battle here.
Yeah, I agree. But
eagerly looking forward to episode 3.
I am too. I think that it's going to be a big episode, and that's why you need these episodes. Otherwise, you get things like the end of the original Game of Thrones, where it's just like stuff just keeps happening episode after episode. It's like you get whiplash, and then you're like, oh my god, like how are they even? How are they even at this place right now? Oh my god, that character just changed so quickly. And you don't want that. You'd much rather the slow burn of that we're getting in House of the Dragon.
Well said. That slow burn is very important. That character development is very important. That the political machinations, very important. And we need these moments to let characters breathe and talk to each other and learn more about them before we just get thrown into the chaos. Because otherwise, I'm trying to think of a random person in the show that would become king all of a sudden in the next episode, and you're like, what? Like, I don't want to the way Game of Thrones ended, or it's just like, and this person's king now because their story's super cool.
They had the best story. It's like, no, they actually did not have the best story. And now they're just kind of king. I'm trying to think. Kristen Cole.
Yeah, I was thinking Kristen Cole maybe. He's got a great story. Rags to riches tale.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, until then, I think we may. It pains me to not have a timely release of every Game of Thrones. See, I'm already doing it. House of the Dragon episode.
Dun, 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 dun.
But you know what? We have so many books we have to talk about coming up that we're excited to share. I just finished one that I'm very excited to talk about in the next coming weeks. So we'll be back with more House of the Dragon stuff soon. Don't you fret. But I think in the immediate future, we're going to crank some book discussions out along the way.
Mm-hmm. You're going to have to crank those book discussions out. But we're also going to have to crank up that sweet, sweet outro music right now, Charles, because we are fast approaching that hour. And I think we've said what needs to be said. And don't worry, we'll be bringing you more House of the Dragon content. It just might be covering a couple episodes at once or something like that. So don't fret, as Charles says. But in the meantime, let's get that sweet, sweet outro music pumping, Charles.
Well said, Dylan. Let's get that sweet, sweet outro music pumping. All right, everybody, that was yet another very exciting episode of the Friends Talking Fantasy Podcast. Thank you all for sitting with us and listening to us talk about House of the Dragon, the Game of Thrones spinoff on HBO. If you like what you heard today and you want to support the show, maybe interact with us a little bit, share some fire House of the Dragon memes or something, maybe.
Nailed it.
Let's go ahead and have that discourse over on social media. We have Instagram at the FTF Podcast and Twitter at the FTF Podcast with a number 1 on the end. Don't forget that 1 when you're on Twitter. Now, Dylan, if someone's listening to the show and they want to support us and they already follow us on social media and they want to do a little bit more, what can they do?
Toss 5 stars to our podcast, and you can do that on either Apple Podcasts or Spotify now
or
these
both
days. So we're really pushing for those Spotify ratings because I just added that relatively recently, and most of you are listening on Spotify. It's right there up at the top of the Friends Talking Fantasy podcast feed with all those episodes below it. All you gotta do is click that. Click 5 of those stars and you're helping us out so much if you do that. But just listening is more than enough. Thank you so much for doing that.
Dylan, just listening. So appreciative, so thankful. Thank you all for listening. We greatly appreciate it. And as always, go forth and conquer, friends.